So, Jakob, thank you so much for joining here on the Business Karaoke podcast. I'm so happy you're here.
Well, I'm super happy to be here, Brittany. Thanks so much for having me.
Now, our connection was kind of serendipitous in a way, because when I posted, I think a couple of months ago back in LinkedIn, my remote work setup, I said, this is, how I work. This is my camera. This is the iPad that I use as like a second participant, because I'm sick and tired after 2 years of asking, can you see my screen? So I actually join another device as a participant, so I see what they see. So I actually never have to ask anymore, can you see my screen? Anyway, and then I had some people just, really giving me some great feedback, one of which actually was to get a better chair, which I did end up doing. And then they said, but on top of that, you need to go and connect with someone called Jakob at Butter. And I thought, okay. So I reached out to you and then I said, hi. And basically since then I thought, oh my gosh, your story is so interesting. I want to jump in and ask you a whole bunch of questions, but it's selfish of me to simply do that one-on-one. So I thought, come on the Business Karaoke podcast so I can share it with everybody.
Yeah, no, it was really random. I remember that LinkedIn post and a lot of people tagging Butter and tagging myself, and I was like, hey, what's going on here? It was really exploding that post.
So, however, what I have noticed in life is that things only make sense looking back. So I think that if we were to begin with what's Butter and how is it making an impact in the world, I feel like without you sharing a little bit of your journey pre-Butter, it won't make any sense to anyone, or it doesn't give the full context. So Jakob, before we jump into all those exciting things about remote work and conversations and facilitation and making people feel comfortable in this remote world and all those kind of great conversations, let's take a step back, and I'd love you to walk us through a little bit of your journey up until Butter, including obviously your time in Southeast Asia. I'd love to hear about that too.
Yeah, no, thanks so much for asking. Yeah, so I guess no journeys are ever fully straightforward or straight arrows. So I started out my career in strategy consulting way back. I was in Bain & Company for close to 4 years, or what's now Bain & Company in the Nordics, close to 4 years. And towards the end of the last year, I kind of got a feeling that I wanted to have a bit more of an adventure. I wanted to kind of get out of this consulting world that I've been in.
PowerPoint slides, the late
PowerPoint
nights.
slides, yeah, Excel sheets,
There's got to be more to life than the slide deck.
Oh yes, and that I would discover. So yeah, and then I got the opportunity to go out and start up the local division of a digital marketing agency in Indonesia, of all places. Had some friends that had started the agency up in Malaysia, and they now wanted to kind of start up the first international division out in Indonesia. And having never been to Indonesia before, but having been to Southeast Asia, I said, okay, let's do this. So traveled to Indonesia and started up the local agency there, or local arm of the agency there called Lion and Lion. That was quite the journey. I ended up sticking around there for close to 2.5 years in Indonesia. We ended up getting some quite nice clients like L'Oreal, Google. Did a lot of interesting digital stuff for them. And after, I think, 2 years there, we got the opportunity to sell to a Japanese company called Septeni that wanted to kind of enter Southeast Asia. So that is a big opportunity. So that we did. And I then stuck around in the company for another year and a half, and helped start up some divisions in Vietnam and in Taiwan.
What kind of time frame are we talking? What kind of year? What kind of time was that? What years?
Good question. It's like from 2014 through 2018.
Okay, 2014, 2018. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a while back now. And I think after we sold off the company, and I was there for a year after that, helped out setting up a lot of new things, but it didn't feel like my own company anymore. Whereas we were setting up the division before in Indonesia, that was kind of my baby, and now now we'd sold the baby. I thought, okay, now is the time to kind of start up my own thing. And again, I stayed in Asia there for close to 4 years, and my parents weren't getting any younger, and my wife's also Danish, so we thought, okay, let's go back to Denmark. So went back to Denmark then in that's mid 2018, and wanted to start up something new. Started something that was a bit more scalable than consulting, than agency, where you sell man hours. It's tough work, right? Wanted to build a tech startup. And got this opportunity to start something up within the game streaming world. Twitch is a huge player in the space. A lot of content being created. So got the idea to create a content discovery platform for Twitch. And that's kind of where some of the initial ideas of what ended up becoming Butter a few years later kind of started. Got a team together, and part of that team was from Malaysia, Indonesia. So we kind of built the company Streamcrux, it was called, as a fully remote company with people in the US, in Europe, and in Asia. It ended up not succeeding, so we had to shut it down in early 2020. A lot of reasons for that. We made so many mistakes, it's crazy. But got so many learnings. I think biggest thing was building something that there wasn't fully a need for, and not listening enough to our users. So that's always a big thing. So that was kind of the big thing when we started Butter, and when the thoughts around Butter started getting in. It was very important for us to understand, like, what is the user problems really, and what are we building to solve for.
That's it. That's an interesting point, because there's this fine line between a niche market, like a highly niche market, versus nobody needs it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
There's actually a very fine line. Like, so for example, even, for example, in our business that we focus on human-centered design in Japan for Japanese organizations, it's a very niche market, also terribly unscalable, and all those things.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No, but the thing is, I think it comes also back down to, who are you as a business person? What do you enjoy? And I adore people. I love the meeting 25 times with the leadership team so everybody feels comfortable. I don't mind that. Some people hate it, which is why they want to go, they find different ways. And I think that's a good thing. Find out what you like, find out what you don't like, and then scale on that. So you mentioned that, so I'd love to go back when you mentioned not listening to our users. I'd love to hear a little bit about that. So is it like that you had an idea, I think this could work, and it just didn't gel with the market, or the needs would like didn't quite fit? What was, again, as you mentioned, sometimes it's also like a cocktail of things to happen, right? And for example, there are certain platforms that really boomed during the pandemic, not because they're so great, but because there was nothing else. So there's also timing as well. So I'd love to, just before we jump into the next segment, I'd love to hear just a little bit more on maybe that mismatch, or even just some reflections.
Yeah, and it's something that honestly I've reflected a lot on. This whole on why, again, when you have a big failure in your life, and when you have something that you spend a lot of, like, it was 1.5 years of my life, right, that I spent on this startup. You really try to kind of break down what caused it. And I think, again, asking to where it was an initial idea of mine, but it was created by research, and by a lot of desktop research. And it seemed to make sense, but that's almost some of the worst ideas, the ones that seem to make sense on the cover. Essentially, what we built was a content discovery platform that matched two types of players in this market, in the streaming market. There's some streamers that create content, and there are viewers that consume the content. And what we ended up doing was just listening to the streamers. So we only listened to one part of the market. We only listened to the people that wanted to be discovered, that wanted to be watched, but we totally forgot or ignored, more likely, the people that wanted to, whether people even wanted to watch these streamers. So imagine a lot of content creators that were creating basically not so great content, that we thought that, there's a discovery problem here, nobody can find them. but the real truth was, well, nobody really wanted to watch these.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, interesting. So there's that, obviously that closing the circle in a way. So having, looking to one side of the market. So interesting. Yeah. What an incredible learning. And I think this is relevant not only for if you've got a startup, this is also relevant for anyone listening, whether you're in the service industry or whatever. Of course, especially if you have your client, right? And you listen to them, remember they also have a client, right? And so this is particularly interesting, especially with Japanese organizations that tend to be a little bit more complex, a little bit more stakeholder heavy. Understanding that, yes, you may be serving that one client, but knowing that then they have that client and trying to help them close that loop, because we do function in ecosystems. So
yeah, exactly. Understanding the full ecosystem, right? Yeah.
Huge.
Yeah. Yeah, so that was kind of it was super funny that would kind of be one of the main takeaways, but it also really hits you when you've basically gone off on a tangent for so long.
Yes.
And ignored what was kind of blaringly obvious in hindsight.
Yeah, but if it was obvious, you would have picked it up. Right? So it's one of those things that you just didn't see in that moment. And yeah, and who knows, maybe even another time, another moment, it might have worked.
It could have worked.
However, but instead it fed into something different, didn't it?
Yeah, exactly. It did. So again, I remember it was towards the end of January 2020 when we kind of, as a founding team, we said, okay, like this is just not gonna pan out. We were having some investment discussions with potential investors, and nobody really wanted to buy it. And then we just thought, okay, let's shut this down. And it was horrible. I think we went out and had a few drinks too many to kind of
yeah, I know for sure. There's a few tears as well, because like these moments, or these businesses are in the early days, not only businesses, they're an extension of you and who you are. And I don't mean to really put salt in the wound right now. I'm only saying that because I know, right? Because I know I'm also when you are often the face of your business, and that you are your client contact, and then and then to go to do like the door knocking and let people know this happened. Oh, it's
I can imagine you feel it too, right?
It's heart-wrenching because you're so sad, and then and then you do have those moments, and then at the end of the day, like everything, you somehow bounce back, or you don't, right? There's two options: you bounce back or you don't.
Yeah, and honestly, it is kind of a pivotal moment, and I remember it as a pivotal moment where everything is super super dark, and we shut it down. But there was also a huge relief, because it wasn't an overnight, like, just as things aren't an overnight success, things aren't an overnight failure either.
Absolutely.
Right? We could see the writing on the wall, and it felt like a relief to kind of shut it down. But we also saw that so the great thing about this company was we'd actually gotten a team of rather talented, I hope, individuals together. And again, the three of us that ended up co-founding Butter a little bit later, myself, my co-founder Chris, who's in the design, who's a product designer, and Adam, who's an engineer, software engineer. We kind of had that kind of hustler, hipster, and hacker trio.
Hustler, hipster, hacker. I've never heard that. The 3H. I love it.
Exactly. It's quite beautiful, right? I mean, we kind of knew that if we were to do something together, we were to stick together, we had to kind of strike right away. So, we shut it down on Thursday, and Monday we got back to work again.
You know what that is? That's when you fall down, you got to get up. You can't wait. You can't wait and sit around and take time to find yourself. You have to get straight back on the horse. I like it.
Exactly. And it is, because otherwise you fall down, you lay down, then you never get up, right? And it's like it gets harder and harder the longer you lie there. So we ended up, like, I think, and that was in February, we started brainstorming and focusing a lot on the user problems. And that was, like, again, that big learning from Streamclocks's failure was just focus on the user problems. So instead of listing down ideas, we listed down problems that we had faced, or that we knew others that faced. we also wanted problems that we fully understood. Again, with game streaming, none of us had ever streamed. We were gamers, but we weren't streamers, so we didn't understand the gut of the problem as much as we would like. So we really focused on that in February, and we ended up kind of honing in on remote work, being rather interesting, because we built the previous company as a remote organization. Again, with February 2020. Yeah,
I was going to say pause. So it's Jan 2020. So you're like, remote work is interesting, and you had no idea we were just about to fall down the global well of a pandemic. Okay, exactly. Nice nose there.
It was super random, because like in January and February 2020, like remote work was like, it was emerging, but it was still like an emerging trend.
Let's be honest, remote work was, you can take your laptop home.
Yeah.
Like you can take your laptop home and do everything, like that's your kitchen table. Remote work had nothing, didn't have the level of like maturity or the level of conversation that we had now. Was if you need to take your laptop home and like answer some emails at home. That was remote work.
Exactly. And it's only 2 years ago, right? It's so strange that that's, that's a reality of things, right?
Yes.
So yeah, no, so it was a bit serendipitous that we started looking at things there already, right?
Yeah. So Jan 2020, like, you know what? I think remote work, I think it's going to be a thing.
Yeah. Might be a thing, 10 years down the line.
Yeah. I mean, let's not get ahead of ourselves, but like,
exactly.
Maybe.
But maybe. So, and then like right as we were brainstorming that, like in early March, boom, COVID. Well, in February it was already kind of happening, but it was, well, again, we had a few team members in Asia, and they were starting to get nervous, right? Well, a few.
Right, because that's obviously where it first started.
Yeah, exactly. So Adam, one of my co-founders, he's from Malaysia, and he was based in Jakarta in Indonesia at that time. And he began seeing seeing countries close down, travel lanes close down, etc. And then in early March it hit Europe as well, and we were like, okay, we've been looking at this, now is really the time. So what we did was, we still hadn't identified these core problems, but we knew that with so many new people entering this remote world, with so many teams suddenly being forced to work remotely, a lot of new opportunities might arise. So what we started doing was taking the knowledge that we had from building a remote company before, and doing workshops for startups, for teams that had suddenly been pushed to work remotely by COVID. So again, we are early mid-March here, 2020.
Right.
Designed like a full structure around this, a full framework for how should you work together, how do you create culture remotely, how do you communicate, all of that jazz. And did it all for free. So, we did quite a few of them because people were super happy to kind of get that learning in. And that's, and the whole idea here was, let's find a commonality, let's find a common thread throughout these organizations, throughout these teams, on something that they're really struggling with right now, that we can build a software solution around. But again, that was like, get to the gut of this problem. Let's see this problem, let's understand it, let's feel it as much as we can. And that's when it really hit us. It wasn't these teams, it wasn't them that were, well, they were also having problems, but the ones that were really having big problems was actually us doing these workshops. And that's kind of what the aha moment for Butter initially appeared.
Yeah, I think that's interesting, because reflecting on your experience with with the streamers, for example, it almost sounded like that you were listening really well, but almost to the wrong people. So if your streamers were your clients, or if your streamers were your users, I'm sure you would have had that incredible success. I think for me, what I'm hearing is, it sounds like the difference is you were listening to your end users, not necessarily only stakeholders, right? And so those streamers, for example, were stakeholders, they weren't your users. And this is like, when you align your relationship and your listening and your investment, like your time and energy and product in your end users, that's where things really start to change, right?
Yep. Exactly. That's because that's when you really get to the core of the problem that you're trying to
Mhm.
solve, and you really get that aha, okay, I fully comprehend this
Right.
issue that people are having.
Right. And so especially when it comes to, for example, like the remote work, people started we had all different kinds of conversations, everything from, so for example, in Japan we had an absolute like mess, right? So the mess was things like many traditional Japanese organizations, laptops. I'm not sure if this is true of other countries, but it's true, certainly of Japan, are not equipped with webcam. Not equipped. Yeah,
Whoa.
not equipped with webcam. So at the same time, however, they have these incredible, like, they have these security walls that are like trying to get single sign-on, for example, in Japan for a new software, is almost, it's a feat in itself. It's incredibly difficult.
Whoa.
I was, I have some screenshots I can show some of the back ends of like what it looks like, someone trying to like sign in. It's incredible. So at the very beginning, like of kind of mid-ish March, early March, we had people in Japan running to like the closest Office Depot type store, buying these 100 yen cameras, like essentially like, like, or not 100 yen, more like $10 whatever cameras, right? That you would plug into your laptop that is connected to this super complex VPN. But because they couldn't connect to the VPN, they would like go to Starbucks and use like the Starbucks effect. It was, and so at the beginning of like remote work, people started thinking, oh, it's a tools issue. It's a
Yep.
tools issue. It's
Yep.
a connectivity. It's a,
Yep.
you don't. So another really crazy thing about, for example, like the Japanese environment is that people don't, because they don't spend a lot of time at home or in the larger cities, because it's cheaper to eat outside. Your apartment is a box anyway. That often people don't even have internet at home. They just have like a whole lot of internet on their phone. And they use their
Whoa.
phone.
I
Yes.
didn't
So
know that. That's crazy.
Jakob, you have no idea. It was like, and when you think of Japan, you think of this like Akihabara gamer, like, like neon lights. And I'm like, no, these people are at home with no internet. They're streaming from their phones with like $10 like cameras that are like connected. Like it was a disaster. So talk to me about when you said, okay, this is what you did your listening, you're doing your research. What were the things that you learned? Because for me, people jump to the tool issue and I'm like, yes, we need tools. Yes, we need to be able to see each other. But that's like step one of a very long journey.
Yeah. Oh, that's so interesting, Brittany.
It's
Like,
crazy.
I think, like, I don't even. There's so many paths to go here. So many interesting things to talk about. I think so. So let's go first. Totally, like, tools issue. Sure, let's get back to that. But I mean, one thing we saw in all organizations was that everyone was having process issues, right? Process, culture, communication. Like, like, again, even like right now for Butter, with 20 people across 14 countries, right? It's not the tools that we're missing.
No.
It's the process. It's not the tools that are the challenge. It's the processes, building the processes, building communication, building the culture. That's what the real difficulty is in remote work. And tools can help you there. They can be an enabler, but if you do not get to the core or the crux of the matter in terms of what the process needs to be like, what the communication, the documentation needs to be like, how to build the culture, then even the best possible tools, they don't really help out.
Right.
We did, however, see that. So again, when we were doing these workshops, we saw that there was just two things that were like super difficult for us, and that hampered all of the processes that we had going on there. The first thing was that I was focusing so I was facilitating a lot of these workshops. I had a lot of experience from doing it in consulting and doing it in agency world. But I felt it was so difficult to actually keep my focus on the facilitation, because I was all the time clicking, stuff on the tools. I was, trying to open breakouts in Zoom. I was sending over links to, Mural or Miro. I was trying to open a Mentimeter page, and then screen share. And there was just massive technical overload on me that was happening simultaneously with me doing the facilitation of rather complex material. so that was the first aha moment, like, hey, why is there such a big overload? Why do I have to focus so much on the tools as opposed to just delivering the material? The other big thing that we kind of felt was that, just like you mentioned, people, like, camera etiquette was not really a thing in the beginning of the pandemic. People, they like kept, or the majority of people actually kept the cameras off. I don't know, like we had sessions across, there was mainly Southeast Asia and Europe with sessions, but in it, like I think 80% of people just had their cameras off.
Yes.
And not because they didn't have them necessarily. It was just like, don't feel comfortable doing this. And it was so hard to kind of gauge the energy of the room and get people excited and kind of deliver the material that we wanted to deliver.
Yeah.
So that was kind of the two things that got Butter started, this whole huge technical overload that we were seeing, and the lack of ability to kind of create energy in the room, which we in physical settings.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And so for me, the reason kind of why I mentioned tools is often people go to tools because it's easier. It's easier to buy a camera than it is to make someone feel comfortable to turn on the camera, right? It's just easier, right? And so for me, the tools conversation, while it's the first step, of a very long journey, it's only one part, and the rest is really invested in that, what you mentioned. Okay, now we've like set everything up, let's now get to work, right? Let's get to work. One thing that I kind of reflected on, and this was like very bad practice in Japan, very, very bad practice, Jakob, is I recognized how much smoke and mirrors we used to have in workshops in Japan. So it was what I mean by that, it was welcome to the 42nd floor of this super nice building in Tokyo. And here's the coffee, and here's the muffins, and here's the whatever. And let's do a welcome. And then let's work for a little bit. And then let's go for lunch. And then let's, and so what I recognized was when that all got taken away, like the smoke and mirror of the workshop experience, because especially also in an Asian setting or in a Japanese setting, it's lots of like relationship kind of building as well. Like we'll come to your office. It's kind of like we're coming to your house. You'll host us, and it's that you have a different relationship with someone after they've come to your house, and it's kind of very similar with office visits in Japan because that's how they view it, right? And so when we had these like very elaborate workshops, everything's super fancy, and then going for dinner at the Four Seasons afterwards, like
oh my
God. They started thinking like, how, like we got work done, of course we got work done, of course we achieved our outcomes, but that whole experience like just disappeared. And so what happened was many Japanese companies didn't know what to do, so they did nothing. They just paused. I had people write me, "Hi Brittany, we'd like to pause, or we'd like to put our offsite on hold for this year, and we'll like review next year to see like just how things are." Like didn't even try to see. And then I was having a conversation with someone with a designer, and this designer said, it's not about doing what we've always done and then just doing it remotely, i.e. what remote work used to be, i.e. take your laptop home and work and send emails from home, and that was remote work. What it's about, and for me, this is what changed things. What it's about defining our cultural values as an organization, and then designing a solution for digital action around that. So if we as an organization value collaboration, or if we value trust, how might we build trust in a digital world? And when you start thinking about that, you really start thinking about things differently. And I feel when I started using Butter or when I first was introduced to Butter, I felt this is not just like a meeting, what we used to have, but now digital. For me, it felt like a new space. And for me, that was really special. So I'd love to hear more about how you tackled that problem too, being the engagement. Obviously, you know, one of those things, people turning on the camera, but your platform really encompassed so much more than that. So talk to us a little bit about how you even go about prioritizing what to develop and how to develop things like that.
Yeah, I love what you're saying there, Brittany, because so just for context, right? Butter is like Zoom, but for remote workshops, trainings, or complex collaborative sessions. And one of the things we actually did in the very early days of Butter was kind of determining like this whole process around a normal workshop, like what happens in a real workshop. Like people, they walk in, you know, they stand, they
Yes.
chat around by the coffee. Like at least that's a in a Western workshop they do that.
Oh, it happens
I think I
everywhere.
would. Yeah,
It happens everywhere.
okay. Forgive my ignorance. um, but again, like these rituals that are around
Mm,
the workshop, like you mentioned, like again, people going to a fancy place to have the workshop itself, the post workshop sessions, all of that, right? Break that, and we try to break that whole experience, like map that experience out, break that whole experience down, and understand, you know, what do each of these rituals actually like, what happens in each
mm,
of these rituals, and why are they there, which
mhm,
purpose do they serve? Like there's the
mhm,
trust creation, there's the connection that happens prior to the session, there's the whole like cementation of connections that happens after the session. There's even a lot of stuff that happens during the session that would not happen in a normal Zoom call. A lot of, you know, side conversations that
mm,
happen because you're not sitting everyone in one big grid, right? So a lot of these things that we try to just kind of break down and understand, you know, the core components of, if that makes sense.
mhm,
So that was when we started designing Butter. It was just key for us to kind of understand how do we kind of try to condense a lot of these experiences into one. And it's impossible, of course, but how do we translate that into something else in digital? How do we serve the same emotional purpose in digital?
mhm,
And for instance, one of the things we had in Butter from the very early days is the waiting room. So when you
mhm,
go into a Butter session, the first thing you land on is a room. There's a big splash screen with a graphic that kind of introduces the workshop or the session. There's a bit of music, you know,
I
happening.
was gonna say with music, that shocked me. I remember when I was in the waiting room, I was like, what is going on? Is this like 19? I thought I had some kind of like pop-up open or something like that. And then I recognized, hang on a second, I'm in a waiting room with music. This is cool. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, and it's like, and again, that goes back to what does the first experience, like this first touch point that you have with the experience, right? What do you want what do you want people to feel, right? And you want to kind of get people a bit pumped, you want to get them excited, the positive energy.
Yes.
And when they land in the session and they were just in that meeting room, they might have chosen a cool avatar, right? Like like there's just a totally different energy than someone, you know, landing into a Zoom room through you know a Windows button or whatever saying join
Mm-hmm.
now, right? um and that's one example of what we've tried to build with Butter. And we've tried to engineer a lot of these small moments that that create delight, and that create this energy in the session, that we believe that you actually see in normal, we can say, or in physical workshops,
Mm-hmm.
where it's a facilitator's job to kind of create that energy in the room, get people, people, as you'd say in Danish, you have the yes hat on, you know,
Yeah.
like so yeah, that's part of the core philosophy of how we're building
Mm-hmm.
Butter.
I noticed, for example, with when using this platform, that it's not only incredibly engaging for the participants, because there's this there's this really nice function where you have, of course, emojis that you find things interesting. So it's like you're having a conversation as you go along. But I also found it really nice that you have this, like, I have a question or I have a comment, like, because you know, so often, you know, if we put your hand up, like in other platforms, it's like kind of what's going on. And it really helps not only that the rest of the room participated, but it also helps the facilitator read kind of what's going on.
Yep.
And one thing that I found, another kind of element of that, what do we do? And that thing that I like to say when I'm kind of teaching facilitators to facilitate is use the real world, or use the external world where you have your experience, use that to inform a better choice for a digital world. Use it to inform yourself. So if you used to go around and check on, so for example, as a facilitator, you want to step back. There's a point that in order for participants to step up, you have to step back. And in order to do that, and how do you do that right on a screen? Like, how do you physically step back in a screen? Like, often you send them to breakouts. Okay, you send them to breakout rooms. But then as a facilitator, you're like in the main room and you're like, is everyone okay? Like, I hope everybody's okay. And then, so what I do is I'll like go off camera. I'll change my name to like just observing, just so people know. But one thing that I found really nice, for example, with the Butter platform, was that you took this moment, which is a pain for me. It's not only a pain for me, it's like a worry. It's honestly like a worry. Like, is everyone okay? Can I help? Like, you know, and you took this moment and you designed it, or you redesigned it, so that when there's workshops open, or when there's workshop rooms open, that without me even entering the workshop room, it's almost like I can digitally hover like above them. I don't even know how to explain that. And so these moments, how did they come from? Not only you, did they come from other people? How do you define these specific moments? Like, we are going to redesign that moment. Like, there's thousands of moments that you can redefine, and I'm sure that, or redesign, and I'm sure that you're in the middle of redesigning many more. How did you choose those initial moments?
Oh, such a good question. And it's honestly just incredibly difficult. And it's also very difficult to always know how to prioritize, right? Because you get so many things, or so many inputs from everywhere. I would say the breakouts, just to kind of dive deep on those. The breakouts are just incredibly important for any workshop or training session. And the ability to kind of push people out in breakouts and be able to actually be able to observe each of the different sessions, hear what's going on, and listen, and see people and whether they're engaged, and in general, like we even introduced like a task checklist that people in individual rooms can kind of check this, say, hey, I'm done with that, so they know what they have to do when they're in the rooms. So breakouts was one of these things that we really wanted to just build the best possible thing out there, because we thought that it was central to the experience. And the reason behind us thinking that was honestly just a hell of a lot of user interviews that we did when we started building, and we continuously do. I think so. When we started building Butter back in, that was May, June of 2020, we started doing every week interviews with facilitators, with people doing workshops, coaches, trainers, design sprinters, Scrum
Masters,
Scrum Masters, exactly. Everyone that was doing something that had anything to do remotely with like complex collaboration or facilitation. So I think at the height of so we reached out to them on LinkedIn, and we spoke with a lot of them. I think at the height of it, I spoke with 30 to 50 people a week, interviews, and we dove very deep on, hey, talk me through a normal session, a workshop that you're doing in real life. Talk me through a workshop that you are doing in Zoom or in Teams digitally. And we didn't try to push solutions on them. We had them talk through their entire experiences and their pains, what they felt they were missing from real life, how they were doing it in the virtual. And we ended up understanding and seeing a lot of patterns in terms of way they hacked the systems to, create their own platform, kind of through, a series of different tools that already existed. And that was kind of our aha moments. That was, for instance, when we saw facilitators using Trello to create breakout rooms, when we saw people having huge Google Sheets with the names on and links to individual Zoom accounts so that people had to click and navigate, like all of these, where we just saw, my God, people are doing a lot to solve this problem. Maybe we could build something better. So that's the origin of a lot of the, product priorities that we're doing. That's when we're seeing people doing just crazy stuff, and we're thinking, hey, we can build a product to make this crazy stuff go away. If that makes sense.
No, I think the word here, crazy, is really appropriate, because when we're doing crazy things, i.e., opening Google Documents, we're having Trello boards open, we're linking individual accounts, we're sending, when we're doing that, it's because it's that level of pain for us, or it's that level of worth it for the participant, right? And so
Exactly.
when you recognize people doing really mental things, you're like, why? This is so crazy that they're doing this. I think that's a really great sign that that it's
That
that
we're
there
onto
has to be
something.
some, that you're onto something, that there should be some investment. Now
Exactly. Like,
I
oh yeah, one thing I have to break in, because one of the craziest things we saw was, so
oh
we
yeah,
we
go ahead, tell us the craziness.
we introduced the soundboard recently, where you can create sounds in Butter, like, you know, buzzer, like or applause or canned laughter or whatever. And the
Yeah.
reason for that was because we spoke with a facilitator, and he showed us that he bought like a physical soundboard that he was sitting clicking, and he had a microphone adjusted to the sounds, and it's like, oh my God, have you done this? And it's
Like at a radio station, like at a radio
exactly like
station,
a
like
full-on radio
literally.
station.
My
Exactly,
gosh,
right?
I thought you were gonna say like he had bought like a physical buzzer or something like
No,
that.
no, no. That would actually be next level crazy. But
Yeah, no, but like a soundboard is equally interesting. Now,
yeah,
all of these like aha moments and these crazy moments, I mean, they have to affect you, right? They have to affect you in a certain way. And you recently mentioned in a recent LinkedIn post that you personally, as the CEO and co-founder of Butter, support or answer more support tickets than anyone else in the organization. Tell me a little bit about how this deep connection to your people and your learning, your community. I'd love to hear how that's maybe even affected your style of leading as a CEO over time.
oh yeah, no, that's an excellent question. I mean, I think that deep connection comes from a bit of PTSD and not being connected
Oh my gosh,
with my
Jakob,
users.
just like, sorry to jump in, but that's everything. Like, don't need that. PTSD is such a wonderful thing to motivate. Yeah, but I'm sure. Yeah, absolutely.
You know, right? So again, I wanted to make sure that I never ever again ignored users, and I never ever again lost touch with who we were building for and which problems
Mhm.
that we were trying to solve. And that's why I wrote the LinkedIn post. I sit on Intercom, which is the customer ticket system, and I answer a lot of these tickets, and not just answer. I try to help people, because if I
Mm,
feel like when people are having difficulty, what do I know, navigating the breakouts or
mm.
activating screen share, I feel almost a physical pain that they
Yeah.
cannot get this stuff to work. So I think that there's also a huge, and there's an equal level of joy that comes from seeing it when they tell about their success experiences, like, oh, I just had like a 50-person session with Butter, and we had like 5 breakouts with like mural boards in each of the
Mm.
breakout, and it was awesome, right? So there's a lot of stuff there that just creates both pain and joy, but kind of make what's the word, where it allows me to stay incredibly close to the road, right, and
Like
really
stay
feel
grounded. Yeah.
stay grounded, exactly. um and I think in terms of leadership style, it's just ensured that I stay incredibly like problem centric and
Mm.
user and customer centric. Sometimes I think, hopefully it hasn't happened, well, I don't think it's happened to me yet because we're not big enough, but for some startup CEOs uh, or in general startup founders, you end up almost playing house, or just, you know, building a startup and focusing on the processes of the
Mm.
startup. Oh, we have to set up our compensation scheme, or we have to ensure that we have the right things on each town hall session, or, you know, set up our vacation policies or whatever, right? So you end up focusing so much on the internal workings of the company, and of course these things are also super important, but you're not building your company for yourself or for your
Mm.
employees. You're building your company for your users. And that
Mhm.
is what is just so tremendously important to always remember. And I think that
Mm.
that's what, you know, staying so close to users kind of makes me
Yeah.
remember.
Yeah. And when you say that, and and you really feel that, and you also feel that like when you speak to really anyone else at Butter as well, and these moments that you're talking about, like I remember moments when you're running a session and something's not working, like I get physically hot,
Yep.
like I start
Yeah.
like if someone can't get into like a mural board or something, I'm like, oh my
Yeah.
god, why, like you're trying to help them, like why.
Yeah,
um
exactly.
And this idea to be like user centric is obviously very important to me as well. And then once and I was reading recently that I don't want to say lazy organizations, but organizations that are there to just operate, like as you mentioned, like we're just here to build the organization, that they rely on policy, whereas human-centered organizations rely on people, and people inform the policy. So for example, rather than saying, hi, everyone, here's our vacation policy, or, for example, with your product, instead of saying, okay, everyone, here's our new like soundboard function, or, you would have never come up with the soundboard function if you hadn't had spoken to someone who had this incredible problem. Because, in human-centered design, we see that those solution space, those really crazy, those innovative ideas don't come from the solution space. They come from understanding a problem, and the problem you discovered in the problem space kicked off an idea that then became an innovative feature in Butter later on. And you start seeing that, that actually all of this is connected. Sometimes people are so scared of holding space for problems. They're scared of holding space for problems, and they just want to go ahead and solve it, rather than sitting here and listening to problems is actually the best thing that I can do. However, it's not easy. So I'm often responsible for like the first launch in Japan for many things. So I have to sit there and I'm like frontline, right? I'm like frontline worker. And I have to say, okay, everyone, I have to be really open. I have to be really honest. And I have to say, okay, everyone, we've never run this before in Japan. So please let me know what you think of the session. Was it too long? Was it too short? Would you like the materials in Japanese? Did it bother you that it was in English? Would you like more breakout rooms? Would you like less? And when you invite that space, I find people really lean in to that and really share with you. But the ability to sit there in the problem space when you're talking to users is not always that easy. So I'd love to hear from your perspective as a CEO, without and also without jumping to be like, oh, the button's here, click here, because actually if they can't find it without you showing them click here, that's telling us something, right? So I'd love to hear about how you personally hold space for this kind of feedback.
Yeah. Oh, I love that concept of kind of the problem space, and just and as you're saying, they're sitting there and kind of ensuring that you actually take in the comments, right? Instead of getting defensive. Firstly, just kind of a fundamental principle. I think that a lot of our worst things, a lot of our worst habits, they stem from insecurities, like personal insecurities that we are either aware or unaware of. And again, when we get defensive around something, it's because we have an insecurity, or you're pushing somewhere where it hurts, right? So I think, and we've all got this, right? But mastering them is a very powerful skill. And I think the best way to kind of take in these comments on product or on a new service being launched or whatever is to kind of ensure that you're the master of your own insecurities in this particular moment, and that you do not in any way get defensive. So be curious, be thankful, be extremely thankful about people pointing out problems or things that are wrong. Encourage it in any way that you can. And as you say, don't ever jump to the conclusion. Don't ever say, oh, but the button's there, can't you see it? Like, how stupid are you, right? Seriously, that's the best way to lose users, right?
Do you know what? I learned a lot of that in Germany. So I actually, I learned a lot of that in Germany. And I'll tell you why. So I learned the politeness thing in Japan, but my ability to sit there and take hard feedback, I learned in Germany. So I remember very, very early in my time in Germany, I ended up living in Germany for about 8 years, but my very, very early, so very early, like probably could have been my first 6 months or something, I gave a presentation. And the feedback was things like, on slide 42, you said this, like describe exactly what you mean by that. And then they would be like, on slide 13, row 10, you said whatever. Isn't that contradicting what you said on slide 52? right? And I remember sitting through what I felt was a firing squad. I felt like this is a firing squad. And then at the end of the session, people came up to me and said, thank you so much for such an engaging session. And I thought that's so interesting. So this kind of area, like the Germany, Denmark, Netherlands, like that kind of stamp on the map, I think do a really great job in, and obviously you've been Danish, Jakob, but holding space for seeing that cool feedback, as in the critical feedback isn't necessarily a bad thing, but seeing it as a good thing. I think that's a wonderful quality to have.
I think it's good. I do agree that there's a lot of directness in those cultures that kind of at least gets you or readies you for that kind of engagement. So yeah.
Now, one thing I also wanted to kind of get your thoughts on is obviously that we're in this kind of in between moment where remote work is no longer remote work anymore. It's just work. It's just work.
Yep.
And we've seen that some people have really lent into it, and we've seen some people really haven't. And then we've kind of also seen over the last couple of weeks / months, the almost the like a 180 to that, which is like the metaverse, right? So everyone forget it, like forget your computers completely, put on your headset, and kind of like that's kind of where we're going. I'd love to hear your perspective on that journey of, as much as we, for example, we're currently now like web-based systems making people feel comfortable and engaged. I'd love to hear your view on not necessarily what's next, but in terms of what do you see coming in terms of our opportunities for doing better work remotely.
Yeah. Okay, that's super interesting, right? So I think like just going into this metaverse conversation, because I think it's so interesting. I believe that there's two big perspectives on it. The first thing is people that are championing the metaverse heavily, I believe, are forgetting that there's a very large part of the world that does not have fast internet.
Right.
And what we've seen with Zoom, with many of these other web-based platforms, including Butter, is that we need to be able to cater to the lowest common denominator. We cannot have one person, people, or even more just totally glipping out of the conversation. So I believe that it's of course good to be bullish on this, but I think that we still need to be very careful of not going too far ahead, because we will be excluding a large part of the world's population. And I'm not just saying this out of altruistic, let's not leave anyone behind. No, I'm saying this because one of the big powers of remote work, and one of the things that we're seeing being enabled, is actually a lot of people getting access, like a lot of great talents kind of pouring out onto the global market. And that's something that's becoming increasingly intertwined into modern organizations. So you have to be able to kind of serve this lowest common denominator. The second part is, I definitely believe that there is a lot to be had from the virtual world and from the metaverse virtual thinking. And again, I've been a big computer gamer all of my life, so I do see the big opportunities that also lie in being able to collaborate in the virtual and thinking of different interfaces than these, as you say, like flat 2D ways of thinking. So there's no doubt that we'll be heading there. But I am a bit more bearish on how quickly we'll be going there, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Have you actually used it before? I used one, or my husband set up a room for me, and it was the very first time, and that was the first time that I really saw like, oh wow, this could be really quite different. And I really love your point on democratization of participation. I've seen that this is not only true for people in different parts of the world, but I've also seen this true just with people who just live different kind of lives. Like we've seen, for example, people who have issues with mobility, who have mobility struggles, that they've been incredible, but they don't have to worry about going to the office and going up to the 17th floor anymore, that, that they're in their home. And so I think this is an incredible thing. We've also seen, it's, of course, there's been other issues with having children at home and things like that for people. But at the same time, you're seeing that mothers not having to, run to pick up their kids in the afternoon, and being able to, participate in meetings and things like that. There's really, that has also been really great. And I, especially using remote tools to encourage different people to speak up. So people often say, that getting people in Japan to speak up must be really difficult because they're really introverted. And while that's kind of true, it's not completely true. If you think about your own teams, I'm sure you have more introverted people versus extroverted people in your own teams. And for me, using a Japanese participant as an analogy has been really good in building me as a facilitator, because I'm thinking, imagine if this person doesn't want to talk. How can I think about engaging them? And so for me, people often talk about, but what happens if someone doesn't talk? And for me, not talking and not engaging are two different things. And I think like platforms like Butter, where you can, clap along or like use your emojis. For me, that's 100% engagement. If you don't need to say something, that's totally fine. But allowing people to participate in a way that works for them, for me, I think is something that wasn't even clear to me how much that wasn't a conversation pre remote work. We gave that or I shouldn't say I gave that not enough thought, not even nearly enough thought of how to get or just allowing people to participate in different ways.
Yeah. And I think you're onto something super big there, because we're actually seeing, like, I think at the moment Taiwan is our number one market in Butter, and we see big adoptions in Asia. And one of the reasons there is people, they don't always feel as comfortable turning on their camera, but they want to interact. They're using a lot of the emojis. They're also using the hands up cue, because suddenly they can do it in a non-intrusive way.
Right.
They're using GIFs to interact a lot in the session, a lot of other ways. And they really like that they're almost empowered to interact in other ways than purely through speaking. And I think there's something really powerful that we've only scratched the surface on there.
Yeah, I mean that. Yeah, you'll have to come back, and we'll have to then have a whole nother conversation about that. But just to wrap up, tell us a little bit about what's bringing you joy at Butter at the moment. What's bringing you joy?
Oh, so much. Like, firstly, Butter is the most amazing, insane journey that I've had in my entire life, and it is just so wonderful. So again, there's two things. One thing is seriously working with a team from 14 different countries. That's amazing, right? It's like, I think firstly, they're incredibly talented people, but just the diversity and the diversity of thinking and the diversity of being, that just expands your mental horizon like crazy. And it is just such a pleasure. They're such wonderful people. So that definitely brings me a tremendous amount of joy. Secondly, just the product, building a product that's inherently built to spark, like to spark interactivity, to kind of spark positive emotions in people. That's fun. That's nice. Like creating the buzzer button, like, people use it. It's just fun, And I do, I really like building a product that just creates more joy in people's business lives, and in kind of an otherwise at a remote world that could kind of be kind of lonely at times. So I think that's the two big things.
Thank you so much. I will add all of the links to Butter, where people can find out more and have their own free trial and their demo and everything like that in the show notes. So Jakob, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today at the Business Karaoke podcast and talk to us, share with us some of your war stories and your learnings, and and how to build a product that people really love. So Jakob, thank you so much. Come back on the Business Karaoke podcast anytime and update us on what's going on and what's news with you.
Thank you so much for having me, Brittany. This was just awesome.